Hello Talk HR UK listeners, this is Season 2, Episode 8 of Talk HR UK with me, Simon Geere from Alexander Lloyd. And this week we are going to be talking about being a responsible business. Now, the sun is finally out after a day of rain here in Sussex, so I'm enjoying a quick stroll with HR dog Vespa in the countryside before the weekend arrives and all that begins. So anyway, on to the podcast. In episode 8, I talked to Natalie Rogers, the Chief People Officer at Unum, and Susan Sanderson, the Senior Manager for Corporate Sustainability and CSR. And we wanted to discuss as a trio really how important it is in the current age to ensure that HR provides a great employer brand via a company's commitment to basically behaving in a responsible way. I think it's a great listen. I really enjoyed recording this episode, and we count ourselves very lucky that we managed to secure Natalie and Susan's time. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it, and I'll catch up with you at the end of the podcast. Welcome everyone. It's lovely to see you, Natalie. It's lovely to see you, Susan. We are today talking about being a responsible business, and over to you initially, Susan. What is a responsible business? What areas does it cover? Why do you think it's so important?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Good to be here. So responsible business to me really it's about being a business that benefits society essentially and addresses those negative impacts that we might have on society, on people and the planet. So we've been doing quite a lot with business in the community this year, and they are the UK's leading responsible business organisation, many members across the UK. And I really like how they describe it as well, because they position it that a responsible business is essentially a healthy business. And it's one that puts having a healthy community and a healthy environment at the heart of their business strategy to achieve that long-term value. And I really like how that's quite a simplistic approach, but covers kind of everything that we want to do here at Unum. In terms of kind of the different areas that it covers, the traditional view is, and it's one that we've evolved over time at Unum, is looking at that kind of community focus of being a responsible business, giving back to your communities through fundraising, volunteering, and charity partnerships, and that's something that we've done really heavily for a number of years at Unum. But being a responsible business, it goes above and beyond that. That's a core element, but it's also around how you're being responsible for your own employees. So looking after your people, making sure you have that inclusive and diverse culture, supporting them through talent development, helping them to grow, and looking after their well-being. And that's become really apparent, obviously, during the pandemic. But it's also how you're responsible for your customers and actually the products and services that you deliver, and ensuring that they actually have that societal benefit as well. And what you're doing is you're giving back and doing something positive for society. And of course the environment as well. That's growing rapidly up the agenda with COP26 starting next week, and making sure that as a business you are being responsible, managing your emissions, ensuring that you're operating as sustainably as possible.
Definitely. It's a lot to consider. And the reason I'm delighted we're talking about this today is over the last couple of months, I mean, HR still seems to be talking so much about psych strategy and post-pandemic pieces that some of this really important stuff that's on the agenda is falling behind a little bit. So it's great to see Unum doing an awful lot of work to promote this now in a very loud way, and you always have. I've obviously known you guys for a long time. So, I mean, just staying with this, where do you think the strategy to become a responsible business should sit within an organisation?
Yeah, I think a lot of the activities can potentially sit in a particular area. So for example, Natalie and I manage that within our people function, but I think what's crucial is that it is owned by the business, and you have that sponsorship and that support and that accountability right from the very top, which we have from our board and our exco. You really need to have that accountability throughout the business, whereas a lot of the programming may sit in one particular area, but it is important that all divisions kind of play their part and have their role in supporting the strategy.
So within Unum, it sits in the people function with yourselves, obviously. Do you think there are any there are advantages to that, because that's not necessarily typical. You know, I speak to an awful lot of businesses, and it sits in many different areas. And I know it's relatively new, I think, within reason with yourselves. Am I right?
Yes, that's right. Yes, we've had it in the HR function coming up for 3 years now. It has been in different functions within the business, and as you say, yeah, it can be in other areas of the business as well. But what we found is, since it's moved into HR, we've really been able to kind of really align it with our purpose and our culture and our values. And really drive that employee engagement for being a responsible business. It means that we can create really fantastic employee engagement opportunities and really champion how passionate we are about being a responsible business, kind of at every stage of the employee life cycle, and just make sure that we're creating those moments that matter, for our employees, no matter kind of what stage they're at. So for us, we feel that it fits really well with HR. It means that we can, leverage off of some really great engagement activities as well to support those programs. And being involved in those activities is a great tool for talent development as well, and supporting employees' own growth and development.
Oh, definitely. I'm with you. I think it makes perfect sense with attraction, which is obviously so key.
Yeah.
But as you say, retention and most importantly, engagement, which is all everyone's talking about now, isn't it? So Natalie, so to switch away from employees for a moment and talk about your customers, which is obviously very, very important to any organisation. What do you think your customers are expecting of you as an organisation in this area?
So we are definitely seeing a shift versus expectations from a couple of years ago, and we are starting to be asked a lot more about our responsible business practices by our customers. So we regularly get asked those questions as part of RFP processes, and very much the expectation is how we demonstrate as a company what our commitments to being a responsible business are and how they are part of our decision-making process, both today but also in terms of how we are going to embed that into the organisation for the future. And I think, in the future, what we will anticipate and should expect, I think, as an organisation, is that customers will start to make their buying decisions about whether or not to choose us versus somebody else in terms of our responsible business practices. Certainly, I think the pandemic's expedited the focus on this with organisations, particularly the issue around being expected to operate with integrity, really deliver that societal value. And customers are really keen to understand how companies have responded to the pandemic and really thought about how they look after their employees, their communities, but also customers as well.
I agree with you completely. It's a really important side of the coin. And we're seeing there, I won't name any for obvious reasons, but a number of organisations recently in the press for the exact opposite of what we're talking about. And I mean, it's so damaging to their brand. And to, when I talk to my kids and hear about the kind of places they want to work when they grow up, from a potential employee perspective, it's not a good thing. And as you say, from a customer perspective, equally. Obviously, yourselves, you're a financial services organisation. You are heavily regulated, as many are. What level of interest are the regulatory bodies taking at this stage, Natalie?
So the Financial Conduct Authority, which is one of our regulators, continues to take a really keen interest, and I think sets out the expectations of employers in terms of being responsible businesses, but also developing those responsible business practices. What that translates into is a real focus on areas such as culture, purpose, and particularly inclusion and diversity. And there have been a number of speeches from the FCA where those have been the topics of, the conversation. So, for example, the importance of culture and embedding purpose, visible leadership, creating that inclusive environment where staff really feel safe to speak up. That's very much paramount and at the forefront of the regulator's mind. Purpose, again, how meaningful that is, how embedded that purpose is into the way that the business works, but also that expectation that staff have to understand the business's purpose and how their work contributes to it. And, clearly hybrid working has brought both opportunities and challenges. And I think, what the regulator is seeking is that firms continue to find, approaches and really give due regard to sort of safeguarding their purpose and values and the well-being of staff, and providing that oversight and governance, given the kind of circumstances that we are operating under. And then the other area is inclusion and diversity. So that's really important to the regulator. So their view very much is that, firms that are diverse and inclusive will deliver better outcomes for shareholders, consumers, but more importantly, customers as well, and the markets that they serve.
It's interesting to see them taking such an active role in these areas, because you think of it as quite technical, how a business operates, but it's great to see how a business runs itself with these kind of people policies and processes effectively. So I think that's refreshing, but probably very challenging for a number of businesses too. So I suppose, well, moving on, this is something you focused on for a long time. Susan, how have you helped Unum? How do organisations take steps to become a responsible employer and organisation, basically?
Well, firstly, I'd say it's never too late, and it is something that you build on over time. It's absolutely fine to start quite small and evolve your programming over months and years, as we've done at Unum. One thing that has really helped us this year in terms of making that shift from having that really heavy focus on philanthropy and the more traditional side of corporate social responsibility into that broader holistic responsible business is to reach out to our stakeholders, both internally and externally, to understand what our priorities should actually be as a responsible business, because there's so many things that you could do, and you can't do everything, and what you do want to focus on, you need to make sure that you're doing really well, and a really good best practice approach to that is what's called a materiality assessment, where you engage with you identify kind of your key internal and external stakeholder groups. So that could be senior leadership, it's your employees, it's your community partners, lots of different stakeholders, your customers, your suppliers, and actually talk to them and ask them, what do you think we as a business should focus on? And that's what we did over the summer. We carried out that materiality assessment with business in the community, and that's been fundamental for our strategy to help us really narrow down where we should focus. We had a fairly good idea beforehand, and actually doing the assessment has just reinforced that thinking, but it's also allowed us to, by engaging with those stakeholders, it's demonstrated to them, most importantly, that we are on this journey and we are committed to evolving as a business, and that we want them to be a part of that journey with us. And I think the other kind of key thing is to be realistic and be transparent about your commitments as well. It's absolutely fine to say you're on a journey. It is a long-term program. It's not going to be an overnight success. So it is about demonstrating that commitment, celebrating those achievements, and the smaller wins and the big wins, and really kind of bringing your stakeholders, particularly your employees, on that journey with you.
Oh, that's great. And even by being proactive and actually starting the conversation, I think that already demonstrates a great attitude from a business perspective, and that you're taking this seriously, and hopefully there were no surprises in the report. Hopefully it gave you told you what you were hoping you knew you needed, you'd done well at, and where you needed to go. So obviously, again, we mentioned the regulatory piece. Excluding the regulatory requirements, what do you think the benefits are of being a responsible employer?
Yeah, well, other than it obviously being the right thing to do anyway, we've touched on talent attraction and retention, and that is really key in terms of how you build your commitments to being a responsible business into that employer brand. We're seeing a lot more, and we're hearing from candidates that they want to know what our commitments are, and they want to know that they're joining a company that cares about it and is doing the right thing. There was a survey a little while ago that I read for graduates taking their first job after graduation, something like they'd be willing to take up to an £8,000 pay reduction if they knew they were joining a company that was sustainable and was committed to minimising their impact on the environment, which I found fascinating.
It's incredible, isn't it?
I think there's only going to be more of that, as people come through. I'm hearing it from my own kids already that they want to join a business in the future that does do the right thing by society and makes a difference. And I think as well as that, it's obviously the reputation with your customers and your suppliers as well. As Natalie said, we are being asked that a lot more. It's not just going to be a tick box exercise for much longer. It is going to be, you have to really demonstrate how you are bringing that to life and you are demonstrating those commitments. So that obviously just supports your public profile and your reputation. And it gives us those connections to communities as well, which could support our talent pipeline as well.
So obviously you have to set this up. You're quite right. Everything you mentioned is going to make you far more attractive as a brand to your employees, your potential employees, your customers, your stakeholders. Obviously, your employees have a part to play in this as well. They're your ambassadors for the brand to the same group of people. I mean, how have you engaged your own employees in terms of Unum's drive to become a responsible business?
Yeah, we've so I talked about the materiality assessment. So a key part of that was actually involving our employees in that process. So we, as part of the stakeholder engagement, we did an employee survey. We had a really fantastic response rate to that. And 100% of our employees believed that it was important to be a responsible business, which we were delighted by. They also participated in focus groups as well, as part of to help us kind of understand what priorities and material issues we should focus on. And the insights that we got from that will support us in lots of our future programming around where they feel that we should be having the most impact. So they've been involved in that, but kind of throughout our kind of journey as a responsible business, we offered lots of opportunities for them to be engaged. Obviously with our traditional kind of CSR program, which is a huge part of our culture and it always will be, we give them lots of opportunities to support our charity partners through fundraising, volunteering, and just being involved in helping us kind of determine which charities we support as well. We've got our vote for our next 2 years for our charity partners coming up in a couple of weeks, and that is employee led, so employees have their say on who we support for the next 2 years.
That's great. I've been very lucky to have witnessed. I've been to a couple of the events you've run where you've announced those partnerships as well, and they're wonderful events and such a great thing to be a part of. So fantastic. So to either of you now, I suppose. I mean, what kind of initiatives? I mean, you've talked about what I guess this is your role, Susan, isn't it, in the organisation? But what have you rolled out already? What have you delivered successfully in the past that you stand back that might be a good example to organisations who are thinking of how they need to get better at this?
Yeah, I definitely think having those networks for your employees to get involved in on top of their day job has been a fantastic kind of opportunity for them, the employees that are involved, to grow and develop, do something outside of their normal day job, and to feel like they're really having a say and making a difference. So that goes not just through our charity work, but through inclusion and diversity. We have our employee networks for those, and we also have a sustainability champions network who are supporting us with green initiatives and thinking about, as we return back to the office and hybrid working, how do we embed those sustainable working practices? So they've worked really well for us. You mentioned one of our events. Yes, pre-COVID, we did actually have in-person events, and one of our biggest successes were having events in Parliament, which obviously you've been to, Simon, where we were actually able to bring a lot of our charity partners together that we've supported either through partnerships or volunteering or grants. And what the impact of that was that charities could connect that wouldn't normally have the opportunity to connect, and could then determine kind of opportunities to collaborate as well. And that's been a great way to kind of showcase what our commitments are as a responsible business, but enable the charities to have that opportunity to learn more from their network as well. We've also done, obviously we've had to adapt our normal kind of fundraising and volunteering for the virtual world. So it's not been without its challenges, but it has been a great way to just think a bit more creatively around some of our events to engage our employees and support our charities. And we've got a great partnership with the Hygiene Bank, which is donations of hygiene products for those in our local communities. And that's been going from strength to strength over the last couple of years. And we also run a food drive every year as well, which for the last 2 years has been virtual. But yeah, hopefully next year we'll be able to have those donations on site again. So they've been really great ways to just kind of demonstrate the impact that kind of giving back has and to get our employees involved.
Excellent, thank you. And I suppose, lastly, Natalie, plans for the future. I mean, this is an initiative that's going to become more and more important on every people agenda, isn't it? What have you got up your sleeve for the future?
Yeah, definitely, Simon. It's not going away anytime soon. So, obviously continuing to do all of the great things that Susan's just mentioned, because these are very sort of core to our culture, our purpose and our values, and it really wouldn't be Unum if we were to stop doing any of them at any point. But I think beyond that, we're also looking to join up our programming more under the umbrella of responsible business. So really thinking about how do we communicate our commitments as an organisation in terms of what we're doing here, both internally and externally, but equally defining and measuring our impact. So, for example, one of the things that we're looking at doing is mapping what we're doing to the UN Sustainability Development Goals. So that'll be something that we'll be looking at in the next quarter and going through 2022. But of course, we need to respond to issues like the climate emergency and ensure that Unum is doing its bit. So one of the other things that we're looking at is how we measure and report on our emissions, really committing to those reduction in targets, but offering responsible benefits to our employees as well. So, for example, this year we offered our employees the opportunity to carbon offset as part of our flexible benefits offer, thinking things like our pensions funds, how do we invest more sustainably in those areas, and offering things like car allowances, but switching from, say, more traditional petrol and diesel to electric vehicles as well. So really thinking about how we can do that in a very holistic way. Also linking our future of work plans, so our hybrid working, and thinking how we can really embed responsible business practices into both how and where we work in the future. For example, encouraging employees to think about whether or not they really need to travel to meetings, and if they do travel to meetings, can they carbon offset for that travel as well. So there's lots and lots of ideas that we are working on, and we've already sort of rolled out across the organisation. But as you said, it's a big topic, and we've got lots of other areas that we want to focus on.
It's really interesting, isn't it? And you've reminded me. So last week I recorded a podcast with the CEO of the Vegan Society, and again, this is an angle of how to engage with staff and certain populations within your employee base. And the pensions piece came up again there about how many vegans struggle to get behind, to get a company pension that falls in line with their ethical views and outlooks. So there is so much you can do as a business, and it's frightening to think about, isn't it? But it's great to have that ammunition, and I'm just delighted to get you two for this. So thank you so much, because I think as a business you are ahead of the curve in many ways. I think you're doing an awful lot of great stuff. I'm assuming there's a link on your website, I think, isn't there, that mentions the CSR work that you do. So for people that don't know and are interested in what they've heard today, please obviously have a look there and get a good feel for what Unum's already achieved. From your external stakeholders' perspective, I know obviously we've worked together in the past. It's always a fantastic organisation to talk about, because there's so many good things to say, and that is it's a lovely opportunity. So thank you both. Any final thoughts? I know I've been sort of corralled you into this today, so thank you a lot for giving up your time. But any final thoughts before I let you get on with your working day?
Well, I just think thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to come along and share what we're doing, Simon. I guess my reflections are, not to feel overwhelmed in terms of if you're an organisation just embarking upon becoming a responsible business. I think take the opportunity to look at what you're doing already and thinking about how you might kind of leverage and improve upon that, rather than necessarily taking on some of the bigger issues around sort of climate change, because they are more complicated. And I don't think in terms of organisations and how we respond to them, it's necessarily as clear cut as it is for some other areas where it's more obvious how you can be a responsible business. So, that would be my advice to any organisation starting on this journey.
Thanks so much. Hey, look, Susan, Natalie, thank you so much for your time today. I will obviously look forward to speaking with you again in the future. And any watchers and listeners, I assume the best way to get in touch with either of you, if they've got any comments, is through LinkedIn. That seems to be the platform that works for us all. And I look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
Thanks, Simon.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks for listening or watching. My guests today were Natalie Rogers and Susan Sanderson from Unum, and thanks to both of them for giving up their time. Now, all other episodes of Talk HR UK are available on the Alexander Lloyd YouTube channel, on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. So please do like and subscribe if you liked what you heard today. I'm Simon Geere, HR Recruitment Specialist from Alexander Lloyd, and I look forward to seeing you next time in our next episode of Talk HR UK. Many thanks.